Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Let's Read Witch on the Holy Night. I totally got COVID. That was me dying last part, but you know what? It's fine. We're back. I will power through with the power of Kino on my side. Let's go. Break time was over. There stood Alco Ozaki and SoJo Shizuki. The first idle conversation they had since first meeting had come to an end. Not that they had any choice in the matter. It was the jarring murmuring from around the corner that cut it short.
Nobody
remembers my funeral. My mourners have long since perished. We were born wrong. Life is suffering. Huh. And yeah, that is 100% meant to look like Alco. The enemy was just around the corner, visible in the mirrors parallel to it. Whoa. Oh, yeah, those are ganders. Whoa. In contrast to Alco's elegant blues, its lights were a malicious red. Yeah. Yo. Bouncing off the mirrors! There was a momentary flash of light before she even extended her arm, but the instant she saw the enemy, her dominant feelings erupted once more. That's freaking cool! She channeled all of her pent-up anger and shunted it into her right arm. The fog that filled the corridor was no magical weaving. Oh, like what? Isn't that what, Irisfield uses? But rather a barrier of raw energy. It was equivalent to setting blaze to 3 buckets of gasoline to create a wall of fire, in the hope that it would stop an arrow in a fight. If the puppet had attacked with its arm, it would have pierced such a wall easily. But because it had loosed curses with no definite form, the wall of energy repelled the attack. While it was a huge waste of magical energy, it was the only means Alco had to protect herself in that very moment. She pressed the shield button. Unfortunately, its protection was reserved to Alco alone. Oh no! SoJo held his hand to his mouth. While the curse had been weakened to the point where Alco could no longer feel it, it had plenty of an effect on SoJo, who was not a mage. As it understood this fact, the puppet turned its gaze from Alco to the unanticipated human behind her. That's freaky, but cool. Enraged, she swung her arm forward once again. The blue light formed a wall to block the gander for a scant few seconds. It was enough of an opening to exploit. Just as Alco was forming the wall, the puppet pointed its right arm at her face and... Oh, are you just okay? Before the rocket of death could be fired, SoJo scooped her up in his arms. He just grabbed her? How he mustered the strength to do so was a mystery, but he turned his back on the puppet and took off running. Well, I mean, I guess it does make sense that someone who's in the woods would be super physically fit. Like, that's all you have to do out there. He was a nimble sprinter, resembling a deer leaping across obstacles. SoJo rounded 2 more corners, ignored whatever complaints Alco was making, and eventually stopped in the middle of the 2nd floor. He set her down. SoJo's shoulders heaved as he caught his breath. As light as she was, running while carrying someone else would make anyone winded. She looked up at him in incomprehension. It made no sense to her. If he had the stamina to pick her up and run, surely he could have stood up and escaped when he had been downed earlier. A bit of a sadness on his face. His words were unfiltered as ever. Though in this moment, fighting for their lives, he lacked some of his usual absent-mindedness. Though he may have turned away because he regretted saying it out loud, his words spoke volumes. For some reason, it pained Alco to see him like that. A gander would do that.
岩洞打ちって言ってね、北欧の呪詛の一つ。魔術回路のある私には効かないけど、抵抗のないあなたには効果てきめんみたいね。
なんだ、青崎には効かないのか。じゃあ危ないのはあの腕だけだな。
God, you are so selfless. Alco had no idea why he was relieved, but she gritted her teeth and fought down the urge to snap at him. There was no use in yelling at a time like this. Above all, she felt that it would have been petty, in the extreme, to voice her annoyance right now.
そうね。注意するのは伸ばしてくる腕だけ。大した相手じゃないわ、やっぱり。
This time it was not false bravado. Such an enemy would normally be a breeze for Alco Ozaki, but her shameful negligence had led to the disruption of her magic circuits, making her even less formidable than her enemy. At this point, Alco had no way of attacking. The only option left to her was to wait for it to expend all of its magical energy, but its perpetual curse mechanism made that a non-starter. This game of tag would not end until one of them was dead. She realized that she was in the same position she had cornered SoJO in earlier. She glanced at her right arm. She could not imagine how she had gotten into such a mess with her magical energy at more than half its capacity. This had to be karma for having enjoyed toying with SoJO earlier.
呆れた。いるところにはいるものね、神様。
She grumbled under her breath as she shifted her focus. She had the fuel for the fire, but not the igniter. And that killing machine would chase her until the end of time if need be. What she should do next was blindingly clear. She had to get back to normal.
青崎、
ごめん、考え事してた。確か。よし、合ってる。しずきくん、そこに横道あるのわかる？
Alco pointed, but he could see nothing but walls of the corridor. For one thing, the floor had nothing but left turns, and Alco was pointing to the right.
2階は中心まで行くと1階に降りる階段があるんだけど、それは私が壊したから使えないの。けど、ここの作りも意地が悪くてね。よく見れば、右に曲がる通路もあるのよ。上級者だけにわかる抜け道ってやつ。
Only the hardcore fans of this small random amusement park. But you know what? There's a hubris to amusement park designers for like small stuff that they would.
あとは注意して探せば、1階の階段までショートカットできる。悪いけど、一人で行って。
Alco turned her back to SoJO and started walking. Walking in the opposite direction of the escape route and down the long corridor toward the puppet in pursuit.
あいつは無差別だから、ここで壊さないといけない。魔術師は魔術師同士で争うのはいいんだけど、みだりに一般人に手を出しちゃいけないって決まりがあるの。あいつの目的は私のわけだし、結果がどうあれ、すっきりするでしょ。
If Alco won, the puppet would be destroyed. If Alco lost, its objective would be complete and it would shut down. Either way, them going their separate ways meant SoJO survived. This is what Alco meant. Though she explained it as if the events were happening to two totally different people.
運が良ければ入り口までたどり着けるわ。それじゃあ、また明日ね。
That better be a promise. That better be a promise. Even SoJO could tell she was just trying to act tough. But she had already disappeared around the corner by the time he thought to stop her. So whose perspective are we going to get? That's the bigger question.
さて。
Well, there we go. Mentally, Alco bemoaned the disaster she was in. The quality of this puppet was on a completely different level compared to the one from the park 2 days ago. An auto-incanting perpetual motion machine was a rarity in and of itself, but this puppet was also equipped for combat with extending arms and gander-projecting crystalline eyes. It was a first-class product that, if put on the market, would sell for hundreds of millions of yen. Although, that was only when factoring in its value as an antique. To mobilize a significantly less expensive familiar. To use such a precious commodity as a tool for murder marked this puppet's master as a completely different breed of crazy from the enemies she had faced up until now.
Verbo in sum, solitare putres uniferis. Ictius merso vitus dies.
Et meus naturustis. Theobeum.
That didn't get translated. A sound of a crackling music box filled in the air. Oh, that's diegetic audio. The automata, animated by its own curses, approached. The corridor measured approximately 30 feet in length. Alco lay in wait around a corner further down the hall, anticipating the puppet's appearance. This was not to buy SoJo time to escape. Far from it. Alco had concluded that she couldn't make a break for it under the current circumstances. Even if she did try to escape and by some miracle made it out of the House of Mirrors, that was as far as she would go. Outside with no cover, Alco would quickly be overtaken and skewered from behind. As long as her magecraft was disabled, escape was impossible. Instead, she chose to force the enemy back. Her situation was not the most favorable, but neither was the puppet's. Though this narrow hall gave Alco no place to run, it in turn prevented the puppet from reaching full speed. The puppet was the weak point of this machine. Interesting. Automata of its era had a tendency to struggle with minute changes in speed.
セット
Thank you for the Ruby text. That's amazing they actually did the Ruby text. She flowed energy into her shorted circuits. Her blood flow and magical energy supply were unstable. It would be difficult to construct a formula in this state. All she could do was harden her right arm by imbuing it with as much energy as she could. Doing so turned her arm into an improvised weapon like a hammer or bat. Assuming she could manage to get into close combat range, this was the best she could do. All she needed now was a plan of attack. The question wasn't what weapon to use, but how to use the weapon she had. The simplest way would be to use the mirror's reflections to hide and then rush the puppet from its blind spot, except for one major problem. It did not have a sense of sight in the first place. The puppet's view of the world around it did not stem from visual feedback, but from mapping the topography of its surroundings. In theory, it was the same as the bat's echolocation. The environment could be measured based on the emission and return of its high-frequency sound waves. Those chants served as sensor pulses. As far as the puppet was concerned, the mirrors were no better than transparent panes, making even the thought of an ambush laughable.
近づけば近づくほどよりリアルに察知される。本当は遠距離からの狙撃が最適なんだけど、ガンドを撃ってくるならフィンの一撃ぐらい隠してるわよね。
Gander was Scandinavian in origin, and considering its simplicity highly versatile. It was most effective at impairing a target's health by pointing a finger. As a single-action magecraft, it was limited to only causing illness, but there was a secret technique said to be the greatest mastery of the Gander shot. The Fin shot. It could do more than simple illness. It was a deadly curse that could stop the heart. I don't know if I've heard about that before. The wound on her back set her nerves on fire. An unarmed girl and a deadly automaton. It was clear that she was the one destined for death. She considered her slim chances of survival when... Whoa? A vision sent chills down her spine. Quietly, using everything she could to clamp down on the feeling, Alco faced her all-too-familiar illusion. What? She clenched her teeth to keep them from making a deafening clatter. But there the sensation of fingers crawling up her neck. Behind her, the specter stared and laughed. That alone made Alco wanted to bolt. On top of it all, when Alco tried to mentally simulate this coming fight, she estimated a 2 in 10 chance of dying in the first 5 seconds. 20%. At times her predictions were harsher than reality. If Alco fought the puppet 10 times, she would die twice. She could not stop herself from visualizing her own corpse. She imagined herself collapsing, crumpling under the puppet's curse. Her eyeballs swollen like a blowfish, blood and other fluids oozing from every bodily orifice. 1 in 5, 1 in 5, 1 in 5. A 1 in 10 chance of death was bad enough, but 1 in 5? Drove her crazy. Alco forced down her heart as it tried to escape from her mouth. Taking in a deep breath, she peered at her own reflection. She thought back to that white night half a year ago. This, she decided, was nothing compared to that. 6 months ago at the Kuonji estate, The Hound of what? The Hound of White Roses, the Wander Snatch, that appeared from, like a Bandersnatch? That appeared from within the thick fog, had killed Alco 100 times out of 10. What? Sorry. Half a year ago, 6 months ago at the Kwanji estate, the Wander Snatch that appeared from the thick fog had killed Alco 100 times out of 10. Huh. A dark curse shattered Alco's daydream. It was only 30 feet away. God, that does look really cool, though. The puppet rounded the corner. Either side stood in the shadows, their forms indistinct. The puppet gave no warning. Without preamble, it swiftly fired a Gander barrage. Just as Alco had planned, the curses fizzled as they hit her mist-like barrier of magical energy. The protection would only last a few seconds, giving her just enough time to... Its stretchable spear sprang towards Alco's face. Bingo! She did say it. The lethal weapon grazed her cheek. All her experience analyzing puppet attack patterns gave her the wherewithal to evade the attack by a hair's breadth. It was one thing if a puppeteer were pulling the strings, but autonomous dolls had their limitations. Alco had bet everything on this killing machine following a predefined template. The puppet would use a given attack for a given range, and she could adjust her tactics to that. Before its arm had a chance to fully retract, she charged the puppet. It was a risky gamble, but her overall chances were slim to begin with. The scales tipped in her favor. If her predictions were correct, there were two ways she would die. One was from a Finn shot fired at that range. And the other was if the puppet's attack pattern was beyond her ability to foresee. Instantaneous mass transfer, otherwise known as mass displacement. Immediately after Alco dodged the puppet's arm, something smashed into her abdomen. Ooh! The head-on collision from its shoulder felt like a rocket. But where had the ability to propel itself come from? Puppets like this were not built to have the ability to jet around like that. They can't air dash. Doing everything in her power to stay conscious in spite of the pain, Alco could just make out what had happened. Yeah, it looked like it was pulling itself on its arm. Yes, the puppet's arm had not returned to its body. It was lodged in the wall and reeled itself from the other direction. Swallowing her surprise, she hastily pulled herself back up. Her abdomen, specifically her diaphragm, had been dealt a significant blow. The attack left her disoriented. Thankfully, the puppet was surprisingly lightweight. Her bones and organs were intact and she sustained no life-threatening damage. She was having a hard time breathing, however. She was shaken, though she managed to keep her calm. In another 2 seconds, she'd be back on her feet. No, that was 2 seconds too long. That's terrifying. I'm like, what am I looking at? And then I realized it. I don't like that. She told herself to calm down, that she was already calm. She only briefly lost her bearings. She was fine. She could recover her breath and her vision later if only her body would move. Above her, Alco could hear the warped noise of a powerful force. She could once more feel the touch of death. The puppet was so close that Alco could reach out and touch it. That also meant it could reach out and kill Alco. By intuition alone, Alco rolled over the puppet's right flank. Its arm was still embedded within the wall. From here, it could not attack. She had made the right decision, and her dizziness faded. Huh. Alco pulled herself back up. It was her turn. Yeah, there we go. Yep. It was only an instant. Within this labyrinth of mirrors, she saw an image of herself. That's scary. Frick.
We salvati.
A blinding, brilliant light flashed. Lacerations appeared across the walls. At the last moment, Alco managed to thicken the magical energy running through her veins into a primitive form of magecraft resistance. It had barely saved her life from what must have been the puppet's ace in the hole. The puppet bore a striking resemblance to Alco. This powerful curse was not satisfied with stopping Alco's heart, but destroying her entire being. Alco did not even have the time to be shocked. This was her chance for a counterattack. The puppet's balance was unsteady, its right arm still embedded in the wall. Alco prepared to give its defenseless body a strong kick, but her knees buckled and she collapsed into a heap on the floor. Is it trying to replace Alco? Because that's interesting, if that's what it is. A sudden nausea and lightheadedness overcame Alco. Her body temperature began to rapidly lower. She noticed too late. The puppet's curses circled the hall. The cursed chant that the puppet used as a source of power doubled as a defense mechanism, crippling those who drew near with illness. She bore the full brunt of the entire time she was in close proximity to it. Although Alco had magic circuits, she was succumbing just as SoJo had. Languidly, she forced her deteriorating body to jump back. With all the energy she could muster, she forced her way past the exhaustion caused by the curse. However, Alco's blood pressure took a steep nosedive, not from the curse-induced anemia, but from what appeared in front of her. They stood in perfect harmony. In front of Alco was the automata that shared her face, its left arm held out like an arrow. The deadly weapon shot forward and honed in on her heart. Then, a moment before it made contact. Buddy? I knew he would come in for the assist, but what's he gonna do? The moment she heard that fearless voice completely out of place in the storm of violence, Alco's body was pulled forcefully to one side. Once again, the extending arm cut through empty air. While Puppet quickly retracted its left arm, SoJo took the brief opportunity to take Alco by the hand and flee at full speed. Okay, I thought he was gonna do some crazy thing and reveal, like, actually, I'm a super mage or something. SoJo ran through the corridor as fast as he could, only stopping when he put enough distance between them and the puppet. Though he had saved her, she looked angry rather than grateful. This did not keep SoJo from saying his piece. In other words, let's finish this today. A rather awkward proposal. Alco remained silent. She was also rather angry, not that she could figure out what made him tick, nor because he'd returned after escaping, not even because he was spouting his typical airheaded lines. It was, she supposed, that instant. The fact that when he grabbed her hand, her mind had gone completely blank. Alco found that unforgivable, which beckoned the response.
Anata, shoki.
In the heat of the moment, she blurted it out before she could stop herself.
それとも自殺願望でもあったわけ。私もあいつもあんたなんか殺す対象に過ぎないのよ。
She finally dropped the pretense and is just saying what she really wants to say.
少なくとも恩を売る相手じゃない。言っとくけど、私助けられたぐらいで曲がる信念は持ち合わせていないから。
SoJo nodded, clearly unperturbed.
青崎がそんな可愛らしいもんじゃないのは、この夜だけで骨身に染みてるよ。
She found herself slightly offended.
けど君は勘違いをしてるから少し正そう。あいつの狙いは青崎だけじゃない。君だけじゃなく、俺も殺す気だと思う。
She was having none of it. Her eyes shot daggers his way.
話は最後まで聞く。どうしてかっていうと、1階の入り口あるだろ、あの細長い通路。なんでかあそこから先に進めないんだ。逃げたくても逃げ出せなくて、仕方なく戻ってきた。
Alco's eyes widened ever so slightly in amazement. Not out of shock, but rather admiration that her enemy would go to such lengths.
それに、さっきので完全に敵扱いされた。あの人形、こっちをじろっと睨んできたし。いや、一瞬でよく見えなかったけど、生きた心地しなかったな。青崎も気をつけた方がいい。多分よっぽど怖い顔をしているに違いないぞ、あれ。
それはご親切にどうも。
うん。なんでこれはもう他人事じゃないんだ。青崎と人形、結論としてどっちが勝っても俺は殺されてしまうんじゃないか。
I wish I could look on the bright side as much as he do.
そうね。そこまでやってるなら目撃者は消すでしょうね。私みたいに。
だろ。でも俺はあいつには殺されたくない。
え？
His words were decisive. As Alco looked up at him, she could swear that he was trying to encourage her. It was then that she realized. SoJO was looking even worse than before.
ちょっと待って。大丈夫なのあなた。
まあ、醤油を一升瓶飲むよりはマシではないかと。
He tried to make light of the situation, but his forehead was clearly drenched in sweat.
そうか。さっき人形に近づいたから。
How could he possibly be able to withstand a curse that made even Alco nauseous? She bit her lip, annoyed at herself for not noticing this earlier. SoJo was such an airhead that she haven't even paused to consider his plight.
下で隠れていようとか思わなかったの？その方がどう考えても安全でしょ？
She really could not understand him at all.
それは青崎が言うセリフじゃないな。
That's the wrong button.
でもまあ、長話をしている時間もない。そろそろ追いついてくる頃だ。
He turned to look down the corridor. The crackling sounds of a music box could be heard creeping forth from the darkness. Oh, you can just hear it.
さっき1階にいて考えたんだ。君がやられても俺は殺される。なら、まず奴をどうにかするべきだ。
あなた、何が言いたいの？
She asked a question to which she already knew the answer. She did it to put him to the test. If he wavered even a little, she would have killed him where he stood.
提案。あいつをやっつけるのに協力したら、俺のことは見逃してくれる？
Hmm?
助けられたぐらいじゃ信念は曲げないって言ったでしょ。それに、あなたに何ができるっていうの？
それは青崎が考えてくれ。得意だろ、そういうの。
The commander who had the overall picture was responsible for delegating roles to their teammates. It was futile to depend on someone who was unable to grasp the situation or evaluate the enemy's strength. SoJo was proud to share that he knew this. He spoke the truth. Alco was the only one who knew both SoJo and the automata. That was why he pointed out that following her orders was, to the best of his ability, was the only thing he could do. It may have seemed as though SoJo had surrendered his capacity for self-thought, but in fact, in accepting that he was helpless, he was, in fact, giving Alco his complete trust.
じゃあ、私の指示に 100% 従うってこと？
ああ。それに、これは恩とか義理の話じゃない。一人だと分が悪いから二人でかかるだけだ。善意でも好意でもない。取引って言わないか、こういうの。
Nothing more city-like than a solid transaction. His eyes sparkled, as if this was bartering in its truest form.
まったく。
That's a solid translation of Mataku. This child must have learned that from Tobimaru, Alco thought. Though she refused to let him see it, underneath she cracked a smile. Sure, he had gotten the best of her just now, but there were times when defeat was not the worst outcome in the world.
労働と報酬ってわけね。それなら理にかなってる。 言いたくないけど。
She relaxed her shoulders and sighed. Her face cracked into a wicked smile as if her fears had suddenly washed away.
それ結構私の好みよ。
Alco repaid SoJo's trust in equal measure. This is a big chapter. This is a big chapter.
結構きついかもね。あなたの役目。
Alco warned SoJo, moving as fast as she could without her footfalls causing a din of noise. SoJo remained near the center of the spiral maze on the second floor.
実を言うと、もう一つ用意しておいた仕掛けがあるの。
Oh?
自分でもやりすぎだって呆れたもんだけど、あなたがここに来るのが遅かったから。
ん？仕掛けって俺用の？
SoJo tilted his head like a squirrel as Alco freely discussed the final ace up her sleeve. Thank you for the map.
地下の柱に着火型のちょっとした魔術式を刻んでおいたの。中心の柱に点火することで、
Oh!
連鎖的に他の柱に仕掛けた魔術も起動する。ジャミングを食らう前に作ったものだから、直接魔力を叩き込めば一気にこういくわ。
SoJo was a little unsettled by how unclear that last bit was.
青崎、こうじゃわからない。できるだけ明確にどこまで爆破する気だったのか白状してくれ。あと、もしかして俺早まったか？
いや、その単なる保険っていうか、追いかけっこの途中であんたを見失ったら、いっそ建物ごと爆破しちゃおうかなって。
Oh, okay. Oh my god. It was her policy to be thorough to the end after all. She laughed in embarrassment, saying it out loud
いく
though.
らなんでも徹底しすぎてる。
You know it's a lot when even he's like, what are you talking about? Faced with Alco's cruelty, SoJo forgot about the situation at hand and protested from the bottom of his heart.
何よ、いいじゃない。そのおかげでなんとかなりそうなんだから。
She shot back. Alco dashed down the corridor, mumbling things that probably would have sent SoJo packing if he heard them. The strategy was simple. Alco would use the escape route to the right and avoid the puppet while making her way down to the basement. Upon reaching the central pillar, she would infuse the formula she had prepared with magical energy and escape. Once ignited, it would take about a minute for the chain reaction to spread throughout the whole house of mirrors, and another minute for the building to collapse. She would be cutting it a little close, but because she had committed the maze to memory, she was sure she could make it out in time. Alco assumed that the chain reaction caused by the pillar would clear the barrier the puppet had placed at the entrance. And even if it was strong enough to withstand the blast, it would not be able to stay standing once the foundations buckled. SoJo's escape was assured as long as the formula in the basement was activated. Next came the most important part. The automaton was at a disadvantage in the obstacle-laden House of Mirrors and was unable to move at full speed. If it was near the center of the second floor when the building collapsed, it would be caught up and crushed by it. So the problem was keeping the puppet on the second floor until Alco could make it down to the
当てに
basement.
したからね、しずきくん。せめて3分ぐらいは引きつけて。
Show it some funny videos on your phone. Ideally, he would be able to keep it busy until she could activate the formula. If that failed to work, him luring it down to the first floor would also be the next best thing. She understood perfectly well the danger she was putting SoJo in, but his lucky streak and running speed were nothing to scoff at.
ただ逃げるだけなら、もしかしてとんでもないことをしてくれるかも、あいつ。
Alco made her way through the hidden passage of the maze, her hopes pinned on SoJo. Meanwhile, well out of earshot, SoJo was readying himself for another desperate chase. This is like a horror, like survival horror game. This is cool. He calmed his beating heart using a method of his own making. What mattered most was that he remained calm. The plan was simple enough, and Alco's orders were succinct and easy to understand.
10メートルぐらいの距離を保って、できるだけゆっくり通路を3、4周すること。横道は鏡のつなぎ目で覚えて。ここなら左回りで6、3、7、2枚目にあるから、そこをぐるぐる回ってれば比較的安全よ。
Thank God this is an entirely linear visual novel and I don't have to remember which ones to go down. It was essentially a looping marathon. As long as SoJo maintained a distance of the puppet's extended arm, and just enough that she could continue to track him, she should continue chasing him indefinitely. Simple though the task was, SoJo was putting his life on the line as bait. And then there was the final order to run as fast as he could to the exit of the building, to the exit when the building began to sway.
結構じゃなくて、かなりきついんじゃないかな、これは。
He nervously stuck his head out from around the corner. He heard the sound of the music box from the other side of the corridor. First he had to make eye contact with it, then he had to head through the shortcut on the right and begin their game of tag. He spotted it and braced himself. Closer, closer. Fearing that her arm could fly at him at any moment, he went over Alco's instructions in his head.
あれ
However, he could not quite remember which pane led to the first hidden passage. Uh-oh. The third? The sixth? The ninth? Oh no, dude's bad with numbers like me! No, he was sure that was mistaken. He was confident that he had it memorized moments ago, but his nerves had gotten the best of him, and now his head was spinning. Then, SoJo realized that the sound of his pursuer was beginning to grow distant, and at an incredible speed. Oh no!
何
Sorry, what? Was beginning to grow distant. What? Distant? No, it's not growing distant. It's getting closer, but the unusual silhouette of the puppet astonished him. Before it had taken the form of a beautiful girl. Oh no, it is running away, but now it made a beautiful transformation and returned to the first floor to pursue her primary target. Uh-oh.
いや、それは。
SoJo was no longer sure what to do. With not even the time to mourn his failure, the puppet had vanished out of sight. I'll be of help, just let me go. Or so he said, but now he could not follow through.
さて、自分はこれからどうしよ
God, this feels too real. Alone, he tilted his head in frustration. He spoke into the darkness as if Alco would be there to answer him. Ruh-roh. That very moment, having arrived on the first floor, Alco quickly understood what had transpired above her. She did not have to strain her ears to hear the puppet. Even during its heyday, this attraction never made sounds like the one she heard coming toward her now. It was a sound of despair. So between the word despair and this environment, boy, I'm getting some big Dingle-Rumple vibes. As if a horde of monstrous hedgehogs were scraping their way past the mirrors in her direction. What a remarkably specific noise.
あ、もうどっち3分どころか10秒持たないってどういうことよ
Rather than buying her time, SoJo had in fact stolen hers. She dreamed of cursing him for failing his one job.
複数の足音ってことは2足から多脚に切り替えたのね
The echoes made it sound like the footsteps of dozens of feet. To Alco, it sounded like a giant six-legged spider tearing its way down the corridor. It was little wonder that it was so much faster than before. Its perception of its surroundings through echolocation was of particular use in the dark. Compared to sight-dependent humans, the automaton was far better equipped to navigate its way through the labyrinth of mirrors. It could not keep pace earlier because of its bipedal mode of movement was not up to the task, but the stability provided by multiple legs gave it speed that far exceeded that of any human.
どうするどうするどうす
Her thoughts spun around as she tried to come up with a plan B. All she knew for sure was that this was a pivotal moment. If she continued standing still, she had seconds left at most. Even in her current state, she knew she could easily neutralize the bounded field blocking the entrance without casting a spell. All she had to do was pour a little of her own energy into it. Alco could sprint with all her might for a little more than 3 minutes. The puppet had far more stamina than she did. She could only come up with 3 options. The first was to escape through the exit in front of her. Second was to hide herself somewhere within the far more complicated first floor. And the third was to run into the basement and be stuck like a rat in a trap.
なんだ考えるまでもない
She made her decision with zero hesitation, moving her stiff legs again with determined strength. The oncoming storm was almost upon her. Her resolve firm, she turned and ran and descended into darkness. No matter what, the finale shall be glorious. This would be the Mirror Castle's final scene. 2 humans and a puppet. A young sorceress ran toward the subterranean heart of the castle, while an autonomous antique chased its prey into the depths of a demonic dungeon. A minute later, a faint blue charge would ripple through the castle. This was the main pillar in the deepest depths of the basement. The pillar itself was not there to support the castle's structure, but it would serve nicely as a symbol into which the girl thrust her fists with all her magical energy. Oh, literally a timer. This was the blow that would bring down the castle. She imagined the scene as she threw the punch, a scene that would soon become reality. It was a simple ignition magecraft, meant to release the condensed magical energy engraved into the 4 pillars that formed the foundation of the structure. Using electricity as a switch meant virtually instantaneous activation. Even he knows what those are. Whoa, there's a lot! Swift and elegant, a hammer of destruction descended upon the castle of dreams that had stubbornly resisted its fate 2 years ago. It was an almost joyous sound, and so the lifeless and abandoned castle of mirrors set the stage for its final and most spectacular performance. Alco's magical energy became an electrical charge that activated the magecraft formula engraved into the pillar. The chain reaction would lead to the castle's destruction.
ご苦労様。でも、思ってたよりくたびれてたのね。これじゃあ1分持つかどうか。
The plaza in the center of the basement. Alco tried to steady her breathing while rotating her magic crest at full speed. She wreathed her arms in blue light, fully aware that she could no longer activate another formula. That's scary! Holy crap! Her labored breathing refused to settle. She stood at the center of the basement. Without being spotted even once, she managed to make it all the way to the central pillar. It was a 100-meter dash in 13 seconds flat, undoubtedly a personal best. She spurred on her weakened heart, knowing full well the fate that awaited her.
入れば追ってくる。地下に行けば逃げられない。当然よね。最後まで逃げ回ろうなんて虫のいい話だった。
Hindsight was 2020. The castle was only a minute away from collapsing completely. If they stayed here, they would both be crushed by the rubble. The puppet certainly did not care. With no life of its own, its sole concern was the elimination of its target, Alco Ozaki. Indeed, the enemy had been willing to die from the start. She resented her own lack of resolve. It wasn't like her to tuck tail and run from an opponent that didn't fear death. That's so cool.
そもそも自爆覚悟じゃないあれ。6足歩行とフィンの一撃は使いすぎよ。もう呪詛による魔力補給じゃ間に合わない。
Such a perpetual motion device was only as good as its ability to regulate its energy consumption. Using so many functions at once meant that it was burning through fuel quickly and losing the ability to process the curses that powered it. It was using up all of its functions that it had already given. It was using up all the functions it had been given to achieve its aim. This was the pride of a tool, if such things could have ego. Those endowed with sentience could never hope to understand. A beast born to do nothing but run away would burn any human who faced its resolve.
ほんと、もったいない。こういう無茶をするのは姉貴だけかと思ってたけど、いるところにはいるもんね。
Oh! She doesn't think it's her. That's interesting. But Alco did not intend to sacrifice play here. She respected her adversary now, and she was done regret. Oh, why can't I read this? And she was done regretting her choices. There was no time to waste.
行くわよ。ここできっかり。
Oh, the music! Alco had every intention of paying it back double for what it had done to her. The energy Alco had accumulated exploded out of her right leg. She aimed for a single thing, a head-on attack. The enemy's response was a curse to crush her heart. A curse that would rend Alco's heart and destroy itself in the process. As soon as she saw it, Alco kicked the floor as hard as she could. Her long hair swirled through the air as she flipped aside. This lateral move was almost sent her tumbling to the ground, but a quick swing of her arm allowed her to regain her balance. A shot grazed her arm, with the curse scorching her left shoulder. She did not flinch. Alco knew she could hold on as long as she continued to avoid a direct fin shot. Yo, parry? Actual parry? Off balance and in pain, it only took her a second to recover. The moment she raised her head, she deflected the attack with a fist full of magical energy. If the puppet had a will of its own, its eyes would have popped right out of its sockets. It would have been floored, shocked at the strong will that allowed this girl to perform a series of moves like this. Literally running and parrying them. Alco's response was instantaneous. While her power was not sufficient to completely redirect the arm's trajectory, it was enough to deflect it harmlessly past her. She's literally running up and parrying. The chant became a curse that robbed Alco of her vitality. Did it still have something left in the tank, or was it actually indignant? Whatever the reason, Alco was easily able to resist its weakened defensive maneuver. Oh! The kick? Yo, the launcher! That's sick! And her right leg, pulsing with magical energy, shot up into the puppet's chest from below. That is a straight up launcher. That's sick! It was much lighter than Alco anticipated, or rather, she felt little resistance. An automaton's weight was determined by its internals, the size of its power source. Ironically, it was the superiority of its music box engine that would prove to be its downfall. So the music box engine stuff is interesting, because we kind of see automatons like that in Grand Order, used with Phantom of the Opera.
Venite, 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 meum sepulchrum venite.
A stuttering curse. Having taken the full brunt of Alco's kick, the puppet bounced from the ceiling to floor, collapsing in a heap. Its internal construction had been warped by the impact, leaving the drum of the music box that powered the puppet warped as well.
恨むなら設計者を恨みなさい。ダイナモの一つでも積んでいれば、もうちょっとは重たくなったでしょうに。
Yeah, maybe run? Maybe run? Part of the ceiling came crashing down in front of Alco, snapping her back to her
ところで
senses.
今、どうやってぶっ倒したんだろう。
She was so stunned by her own victory that she forgot the House of Mirrors had already begun to collapse.
こっちのがやばかった。
There was no time to relish in her victory or pity her opponent, not unless she wanted to meet the same fate. As the situation stood, she found it hard to imagine getting out alive.
急げ、ダッシュだ私。
Gotta get dashing. She slapped herself on the cheek and took off. Maybe not the one on her face this time. This was her bounty for finishing the battle in a matter of seconds. With her breathing labored by all the excitement, she ran for the exit. Dang, yo, this place really coming down. The collapse was intensifying by the second. Having lost its support pillars, the castle was buckling under its own weight.
この邪魔。
Escaping from the basement was proving to be no easy task. While she was taking the shortest route possible through the maze, she was nearly crushed by a falling piece of the ceiling along the way. This was the second time, no, third, she had to deal with fallen rubble along the way. Good thing she got her shots back. She destroyed the debris on the stairs with magic bullets as she ran. The automaton's jamming had long since worn off. The earlier attack had damaged the vast majority of its functions. Big Fate Zero energy from this. Very similar. Her breathing was heavy as she ran. The intensity surrounding her sparked her brain into overdrive. The ceiling seemed to be collapsing in slow motion. For a second, felt like 5. For her, a second felt like 5. Her frayed nerves made it hard to read time correctly. As her life seemed to flash before her very eyes, a light at the very end of the tunnel. Oh. There was debris riddled throughout the stairway, forcing her to crawl up it. She emerged from the destroyed basement into the collapsing first floor. That the plaza was still traversable at all was a miracle in itself, and fortunately for her, the crucial path to the exit was still intact. The corridor to the entrance was still intact. The basement maze only extended as far as the plaza, so the entrance corridor wouldn't collapse. Only the ceiling would cave in, leaving the scaffolding surround intact. She got herself this far by telling herself repeatedly that fate would decide whether or not she had reached the plaza. Her gamble paid off. It was her lucky day. All she had to do was muster the last of her strength and keep moving forward until... She hesitated for a fraction of a second. Was it naivete? A sense of responsibility? She pushed aside the image that popped into her head and continued running down the corridor.
言っとくけど、時間合わせの余裕はないわよ。そんな上等な作戦じゃないし。お互いできることをやったら最速で出口に向かいましょう。
That was 5 minutes ago. At the time, SoJo had nodded with trepidation, and Alco had not bothered to ask herself why.
何様だっての私。今は走ることだけ考えろ。
The corridor was giving out too. If she were to look back, she was sure she would see the building collapsing in on her. She was also sure she had no time to waste doing so. Her luck was fading as fast as the building's structural integrity. It was a small miracle that she had escaped serious injury up to this point, and she could not afford even the slightest slip-up. An ankle sprain, loss of balance, even a sneeze would be fatal. Which is like, normally that only kills hamsters. Don't sneeze in the same room as a hamster. A simple pat on the back was enough to end it. So naturally... Aw, yeah, there it is. There it was, clear as day. From the detritus of the hallway, death had arisen to take her down with it. A corpse that had crawled its way from the depths of hell itself. It was still operational. And it was still armed with curses. That noise is terrible. It had crawled after her, watching as Alco desperately tried to save herself. The puppet's arm shot forward. While Alco did not turn to meet it, she could see its reflection in the mirrors. Extend, extend, extend. This time she could not dodge it. There was absolutely nothing she could do. The puppet with her face sang. Oh? For a moment, she could not believe her eyes. This was the last thing she expected to see.
しつこいぞ、お前。
A fire extinguisher. A fierce expression adorned the face of the boy who had been waiting in the plaza as she smashed the puppet's outstretched arm. Anger really did not suit him at all. His weapon of choice was a fire extinguisher. He must have searched the maze for something to use as a weapon. No, never mind that. It was too crazy to contemplate, but he had stayed behind for her? Alco stopped the feat she had sworn to herself she would never stop moving and extended a hand out to him. SoJo tossed the fire extinguisher aside and took off running. Music is very, like, minus the chanting, but very near in terms of the, like, very Okabe, that's the composer. Just the motion of the strings, right? That and especially the drums, right? You hear that, right? Like you hear that pushing forward of the drums. Pieces of ceiling continued to collapse like dominoes. They kept moving with dust and dirt following in their wake. Their shadows raced through the collapsing corridor with all their strength. The castle was in the throes of death. With a massive crash and a cloud of dust, the final chapter of the fairy tale that had been Kitschyland came to an abrupt end. Well, now where all the kids in town go to make out. It's over. This duel to the death was over. For a moment amidst their swirling emotions, all past enmity was left behind, and the two collapsed on the lawn and basked in a strange solidarity. The ringing in their ears subsided before long. A tremor of such magnitude seemed impossible in an amusement park like this. As the sounds of destruction echoed across the park, Aqua addressed the individual at her side.
ねえ、生きてる？チェ。
While the click of her tongue was adorable, the meaning behind it was anything but.
青崎、あいつどうなった？
見ての通りよ。今頃バラバラ死体になってるんじゃない？
SoJo sighed, not wholly relieved by her frank response. His reason...
でも、そんな心配より自分の心配をした方がいいと思うわよ。
He wasn't out of the woods yet, after all.
青崎、子供の頃はいじめっ子だっただろ。
可逆趣味はないって自負してるけど。
I don't know about that.
それで、今の自分の立場、わかってる？
She sat up and smiled. SoJo hung his head in shame, wondering why her kind tone and expression were so chilling.
面目次第もございません。
かしこまってもダメよ。あの提案には大前提があったわよね。これは取引だって。あなたが役に立つのなら見逃してあげるっていう。
Oh, right, and he technically didn't.
わかってる。だから面目ないって言ってるだろ。
SoJo made a show of avoiding her eyes, like a pouting child. Alco was taken aback by this sulky display. Perhaps he was angry at himself, rather than her. He was not mad because she would not let him go. He was mad that he had not done his part. Alco sighed for what seemed like the millionth time that day. She could still not figure out what surprised her more, his unconditional kindness or her naive approval of it.
じゃあ、覚悟はできてるの？
そんなのはできないけど、約束だからな。結局は何もしていないし。
It was certainly the case that he failed to do any of the things she had expected of him. But just then, she glanced back at the collapsed house of mirrors. What had he done after failing so spectacularly? He had searched for the extinguisher so he could use it as a weapon, and waited patiently in the plaza as the maze collapsed all around him because he thought it was wrong of him to leave alone. It was a foolish choice and the exact opposite of her choice to run towards the exit without hesitation.
ま、それでよしとするか。
She was satisfied, even as she was shocked at how naive she was being. It was true that he had saved her. She smiled inwardly, admiring, if only for a moment, the bravery he continued to show in the face of such extreme circumstances.
役割は果たさなかったけど、アフターケアは合格だし、約束は守らなくちゃね。
With a nod, she pulled herself to her feet.
約束は、いつか守ってもらうとして。
The girl tried to keep a straight face as she offered a hand to the boy still lying on the ground.
結果はどうあれ手助けしてもらったし、特別サービスってことで、今夜はもう手を出さないであげる。
She's blushy. She bashfully averted her gaze. Though her profile appeared different than it had been in the past, it was still clearly the face of the vibrant girl he met the day he first arrived in town.
何よ。
As if she had felt his eyes on her, she shot him a frowning glare.
いや、突拍子もないけど、青崎は律儀だなって。
Okay, but when you say fair, do you mean like balanced, or do you mean like fair maiden? He took her outstretched hand. Feeling his weight as she pulled him up, she could not help but think he was the last person she wanted to hear that from.
ところで、今夜はって言うけど、明日からは？
さあ、その時になったら考えるわ。
She shrugged her shoulders as if not sure herself. The response was so unlike her that it made SoJo smile. Was it the solidarity of having escaped death together, or the fleeting camaraderie that made him do so? It might have been for this night only, but the air between them was kind and gentle. A lot had transpired, but the midwinter nightmare had come to an end. The pair had overcome many trials and tribulations and could now leave the Mirror Realm in their wake. But before that...
随分と身勝手ね。それはあなた一人で決めていいことだったかしら。
Oh.
青子。
Oh. Oh. It was the voice of a beautiful singing bird and a merciless machine all rolled into one.
アリス。
Her voice quivered as she spoke the name. The lady in black made her presence known. The night was not yet over. Her name was Alice Kuonji. She was a witch whose name struck fear into the heart of Alco, an avatar of the night who would allow no witness. Oh, frick. I was like, well, we're done. We're awesome. Hey. Oh, well. We kind of are, but there's more. Night of the Witches 2. It's still going. Dang. Dang, dang, dang. So wait, the archive, so that's Night of the Witches 1. That was long. Oh, Chapter 5, Part 1. Oh, this is a mid-part save. Wow. Okay. Dang, this is cool, though. I like it. I like it, I like it, I like it. So one thing I do want to... Yeah, 5B. Wow, okay, now we're getting mid-chapter saves, which is good. One thing I do want to show off, which I did see. CG mode. We go to... this. So, I looked at this and I'm like, how come this looks so familiar? And that's because this is literally the exact same, like they use this silhouette for the stun icon in Grand Order. Like, the one that's like one of the stun icon for the skills there. That's wild. That's that exact silhouette, huh? Also, yeah, I'm just looking here. God, that's scary. Ooh. Oh, you can press X for the alternate versions? Oh, you can get, like, the regular image, and then the post-processing added. Cool. Oh, yeah, there's the alts there. Okay, that's good, that's good. Look at that launcher! Yeah, we can zoom in, good. Look at that form! That's sick! That's so good! That's so good. God, yes, this game is good. Press, yeah, that's sick, that's sick, that's so good, that's so good. Oh, this game's so good! Alright, guys, we'll be back with some more Witch on the Holy Night next time. We'll see you then for part B of this chapter. We're not done. The night continues. We'll see you then. Ciao.